But if I go back further, my first proper pay job was probably at about 15, working as a gardener at my parents' school, where we actually lived on site down in Sumner at the Van Esch College. So, and I'd spent a lot of time farming on my uncle's farm growing up, so I had done a lot of different jobs before I got into property. So my first property job was with Peter Cook in Christchurch, and Peter was a well-respected realtor and property valuer in Christchurch, and he took me on when I was at Lincoln University at 19 years old, so I got trained up in property by him. I was the first female to work as a valuer in private practice in Christchurch. And when Peter took me on, I met one of the older valuers in town. And just to give you an idea, he was probably in his 70s at that time, and he was smoking a pipe in his office. And he was quite perplexed, and he said to me, "Leonie, I can't understand why Peter took on a female valuer." And, you know, at 19 years old, I was sort of a bit bewildered by this comment. But I realised in later times that Peter was quite visionary at that time. But he taught me a lot, not just about valuation in the property market, but about integrity, about purpose, about values, because that was the man that he was. And he also taught me that people are your greatest asset and that the culture that you have in your team is everything. So heading into my own business, that was driven largely because just prior to that, I had been doing some work for the Real Estate Institute. And at the time I was just watching the technology. I've always had an interest in technology as well. And I was talking to various people about the internet. Now this is back in 1995, in the very, very early days. And I said, this is going to have a massive impact on the real estate industry. And so I started doing some work on this, and I basically got laughed out of the room, and people thought I was completely crazy. But I kept persevering, and I showed Peter the concept of the internet and what it could mean. And he got it. It was like this hallelujah moment. And Pete got in behind the work and encouraged the Real Estate Institutes to support it, and a committee was set up to investigate it. But one of the things I learned from that was that started because of my vision and my ideas, and I thought to myself, next time I come up with something, it's going to be mine. And so after I worked at Real Ends for quite a few years and made sure it became profitable and got it working, and then I stepped away and I decided the next business venture would be something that I would own. So I bought a small rundown, largely residential property management company, and then over the next 7 years grew it to a large one with very good systems, processes, technology, changed the culture, great team, and then sold that in 2007. I think leadership always starts with yourself before you think about anybody else, because I think leadership is about being authentically you, and it starts with your own purpose and values. And I'm a very purpose-driven leader, so I'm very clear about why I'm doing things, because that's what gets me up in the morning, and I like to have an impact and make a change. And then it sits alongside your values. And, you know, some of the things I saw when I was younger in our industry, I didn't really like in terms of some things that I saw about how people were treated. And I always thought to myself, if I'm in that situation of having staff or being a leader, I want to do it differently. And so I've always been huge into the values around how you treat people. And, you know, because people whilst they come and they do a job at work, I think you've also got a responsibility to create an environment where they get to be the best person and achieve the highest level skills that they can do. And I also believe that, you know, we can create great cultures and we can live the values that we all talk about. And I think that's what is so important. I think the other bit of leadership, which I've seen, apart from focusing on the teams that you build, is when you take a wider view, say for example, of the property sector, and identify things that aren't working or where there's opportunities for change. And I think Real Ends back in 1996 was one of those, because I was, you know, very young at the time, and I had all the senior leaders in the industry basically laughing me out of the room and telling me I was crazy. And I think leadership sometimes is about keeping going, even when a number of people think that you're crazy, and also doing the right thing. And if I think back to 2016, when I did a whole lot of work around how to solve housing in Auckland. Housing has been one of my passion projects, and I think it's a critical issue for the country. That to me was about leadership. I've spent time in the public sector as well after I'd sold my business, and so I realised, we need to all work together and come together to solve some of these problems. So it's, putting your head above the parapet and saying, hey, this isn't good enough, or this isn't right, this is where we need to go. I think that's also leadership. When I think about housing, the journey probably starts with my parents. And Mum and Dad got married in 1962, and they were both teachers, didn't come from any family money, but they scrimped and they saved up £500, and they were able at the time to borrow £3,500 and get a house in Titirangi, Auckland. And I suppose the issue that I see today is that a family like my parents, 2 teachers with 3 kids, wouldn't have a hope of buying a house in Auckland today. And I just think there's something fundamentally wrong with the way things are when our key workers like our teachers and our nurses and our police can't buy a house. And I think the other thing that I've seen is that having spent time, coming from the private sector, being quite entrepreneurial and a leader, and then spending some time in the public sector and understanding the challenges of that environment, I've realised that if we want to solve some of these big issues, we've got to come together much closely and work together, and housing that's the only way we're going to solve it, by bringing all the different parties, whether it's central government, local government, iwi, the private sector, the community housing sector and the finance community together to actually solve housing. So it's a real passion project. You can probably tell of mine. I've worked on it for many years in different sorts of roles, but I just think it's such a fundamental issue for our country. I see progress and then I see things stopping, and so one of the challenges that you see is housing is a very big, complex system, and there's a lot of nuances in it, and we all talk about housing and the problems, but I've still yet to see anyone who's identified what success looks like. And so I know when I launched the work I did back in 2016, I just put out a straw man for what I thought success looked like. So I said for Auckland, the vision was housing was at the heart of strengthening and connecting communities. And then I said, you've got to have some really clear targets. So I said, right, housing supply, 15,000 houses a year, half of which are affordable, that we get a home ownership rate in Auckland of 65%, including Māori and Pacifica, that we have a target of 95% of all existing homes being to a standard of warm, safe and dry, that we have a zero wait list for social housing, that we end homelessness in our city, that we have long-term tenure options for tenants, and that with all of this we continue to strengthen and ensure we have desirable communities. So I said, if we start with that, to me that would be success. And that's the bit that I still don't think we're seeing. I've seen parts of it, and there has been progress in certain areas, but what we need is we need long term. We've got to have a plan of at least 10 years where we're not stopping and starting things, and that there's more certainty about what's going to happen. Well, I've had a fascinating journey in the property industry, so I'm really enthusiastic about property. So I say, come into the industry, it's great. I think be clear about, and always think about, what is your purpose? So what's your real passion and what drives you? And that you might not always know that, when you say straight out of school or out of university, but it's a good topic to, ask yourself, and that will change over the years. But be clear on, and really get clear, and I call it heart speak, where you're really thinking about, what is that thing inside you that's really driving you that might make a difference? So, but come into the industry, try different things and find out what you're passionate about, work hard, and that was something I was always told, you work hard, but there's a lot of fantastic things that you can do, and you can have such an impact on the country about things that we do and leave a legacy. So I encourage people to come in at whatever type or role that they want to play.